Hi, I'm Charlotte Curtis, Head of Adult Services with your Livingston Parish Library, and I'm here today with the Director of the library, Giovanni Tairov. We're introducing something new that we're trying out this summer, and I'm very, very excited about it. As all of you know, the last few months have been anything but typical for everybody, not just here in our area, but for the entire country. So our leadership did not want to leave you out in the cold, even though we couldn't have regular programs. And summer reading program was coming up, and you know how much fun that is and how much we all look forward to it, staff and patrons alike. So in a very, very short period of time, right?
Yes.
We turned around in the course of about 3 weeks and came up with an entire slate of programs for the adults as well as for the children. For the adults, you'll be having Technology Tuesdays, which is at 1 o'clock. We'll have a video that gives you instruction on how to use all of the fabulous resources we have here at the library. I know that there were some databases that I knew that we had that frankly I had never learned how to use. But these videos are so well done that even I can follow them, and so now I can make use of all the resources. On Wednesdays, we're going to continue with the craft videos that we've done during our closure, and I know a number of you have been following us along. Please keep doing that because there's an important change now with crafts. You call your local branch and tell them that you want to pick up a craft packet, and when you go to the library, we'll give you a bag with all the materials that you need for the craft. But today, Thursdays, we have something that I'm really excited about. It's a segment we're calling Talking About Books. In this segment, we ask people across our parish to talk about reading and the impact that reading has had on their life. I've asked everyone that I'm going to be interviewing, tell me about a book or maybe a few books that have had a special impact on your life. And I always tell people, it doesn't have to be a big, thick, impressive book, although it's fine if it is. But I tell them that when I ask myself that same question, this is my impactful book, Alexandra the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. If you haven't read it yet, check out a copy at our library. You'll love it. And the last 3 months, I've recited the line from here that all of you who do know this book will remember. Some days are just like that. But if you just keep going, it gets better. So today, we're going to be talking with Giovanni Tairov, our director, about books and the influence that they've had on his life. So first of all, thank you, because I know how very, very busy you've been.
Thank you.
The only reason that we are able to do everything that we're doing is because we know that you're not afraid to try something new.
Right, and to mention something that you have just said, that I am immensely proud of our staff. The resilience and the creativity and how quickly they were able to turn things around and think on their feet and create such wonderful, beautiful, rich programming, virtual programming that we have never done before prior to this public health crisis. It just puts a lot of pride in what we do, makes you very happy and blessed and fortunate to work with such a professional and talented team. So kudos to everyone on our Livingston Parish Library team.
Which of course we couldn't do without your support, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to have you kick off this series because I remember when I first started working here at the library, we were talking about books one day, and you told me a wonderful story about you and libraries when you were young. Would you share that, please, with our patrons? I think they'd love to hear it.
I'll try. Thank you for asking this question. As far as I remember, as far back as I remember, I've always enjoyed reading. My mother tells me, I don't remember it for a fact myself. My mother tells me that I started reading fairly early. I was almost 5 when I began reading. That made her proud of her, work and what she was trying to do with me in terms of instilling the love of learning and reading. And so And from the early age, she made sure that I was part of something bigger, something educational, and she made sure that both my brother and I were library patrons. So we grew up in a fairly large city, industrial city, and unlike the beautiful libraries that we have here, and our community is blessed to have them, beautiful libraries like they are. Where I grew up, we had a very few libraries, and they were much smaller, much smaller. The library that I belonged to it was probably twice the size of this office. It was an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment that was converted into a public library for children.
Wow.
But no matter how small that facility was, to me it was the world, because you would go there and the librarian was always happy to see you. She knew exactly what you wanted to read. The librarians were very attentive to every child that was a patron of that library, and they made sure that they did a reader's advisory, that they gave us what we really wanted to read, and also kind of nudged us to something that maybe wasn't comfortable or within our reading preferences. And so that was very impressive to me. To this, from my point of today, when I look back to those days, I am very impressed with the level of work those librarians did with kids. Mom and I would go at least once a week when we could, and the library was, we would take many bus lines to get to that library. So it wasn't like today where you jump in the car, within 5 minutes you're near any public library. It would kind of be a special trip for my mother and I. And when I couldn't go to her, to this day I'm very thankful for this, because when I couldn't go personally or with her, she would make sure that when she was coming back from work, she'll make a detour, stop at the library, grab something for me, and bring something to read. So that was...
So I like what you said about that, because that really underscores how important the influence of a parent can be.
Yes, immense and very, very important, especially through those formative years when children grow up. It's important to get them interested in learning and reading. That kind of guarantees almost their later success in life. Because reading, you can't just avoid it. No matter the social media these days and what different resources of information we have, reading still remains probably the most fundamental way to learn for people. And you can't avoid not reading because it's, whether it's professional or for leisure, anything that you do in life, this is the way we consume information.
Well, I mean, even social media.
Right.
If you can't read a tweet, then, you know.
Exactly. It goes to the very basics of what we are as people, as human beings.
And it sounds as if that first librarian that you had also, sometimes people think that all a librarian does is check in books and check out books.
Yeah.
But your librarian knew how to
what we call in our professional trade, reader's advisory.
Yes.
She had to know every child's preference, their aspirations, I guess, of what they like to read, whether it's fantasy or sci-fi or adventure, and they provided that service. And sometimes she would call me and say, hey, I have a few books ready for you, when are you coming over? So very personal, professional touch on top of what the parents were trying to do.
So the librarian supported what your mother and dad were
Yes,
trying to do.
Indeed.
That's great. So what were some of those books that you remember?
Oh, and it's, I've read a lot, but I think by the time I've reached 3rd grade, I've read a lot of books. My mother is still proud of the fact that, I consume books like crazy. It's hard to remember every title there.
But you were telling me about a series
Yes,
that unfortunately,
yeah.
because he can not only read in English, of course, he can read in several other languages.
But in this particular case, one of the books that I was thinking about it earlier today, what would I mention? And one of the titles, of course, will be familiar to the American readers. Of course, the Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That book was read and reread and read over again, and it was very popular with both, I loved it myself and a few of my classmates.
So wait, when you were a child...
It was translated. Let me preamble with a statement that it wasn't in English. So it was adapted, translated to Russian.
So the theme translates, it's a universal theme.
Yeah, and who would have known that years later I would end up almost...
Right by the Mississippi.
Right, exactly. And in fact, one of the things that my family said when they first got here was like they wanted to go see Mississippi because that story is so resonated with them. It's a beautiful adventure story. Yeah, that was one of the books that I would remember. But a couple of others that really were, I regret that they haven't been translated to English yet. One of the books is by the famous German author, Paul Marr. He wrote a series of books for children with a character called Sams or Zams in German. Mm-hmm. He had a different name in Russian, but those the first book in series is called 7 Saturdays in a Week. So anyway,
7 Saturdays.
7 Saturdays.
I love
in a
the
week.
title.
Yeah, it was just when you asked me what was special about it, I can't really fully recall, but I remember just enjoying it very much. Both myself and my brother, I would hear, like when he read the book, I would hear him giggling out of mm-hmm. from his bedroom. I was when I read it, I just couldn't help but laugh. It's a story of a creature that basically it's a creature kind of small. It's not I wouldn't call it that an alien, but anyway, this little creature ends up living with his office worker who ends up being his father, I guess. And it's just the adventures of this little creature. It's a character who is very curious about everything around him. And so it's just a story of adventures.
Were you in the States when the TV series Alf was on?
It's not similar to it, but I think the premise is very similar. It's just his adventures. And there's another book by an Estonian author, Anu Raud. Again, it's a story of a small raggy doll that a brother makes for his younger sister and presents it to her as a gift for her birthday. Well, his sister loved the doll so much and gave so much love to this doll that the doll actually comes to life. And so it talks about the adventures of this little girl and the doll, and it's just it's beautiful. I wish that someone would translate that into English. A worthwhile story. So that's about the children.
So that's the foundation, and then
and many more, yes.
And then as you became a more mature reader, what sorts of books is the director of the library reading?
No, I guess my choice of books is very eclectic. On one hand, I have to read so much professional literature. As you know, I'm back in school. I'm pursuing my second graduate degree, so I read a lot for work and studies. So there's a lot of dry and academic literature on that end.
Not that academic literature is dry.
Right. But as far as for pleasure, again, it's a variety of different titles. I tend to read a lot of nonfiction. When I pick up a book that I want to read for leisure fiction, this inner voice always kind of, it's something that I struggle with myself, that, this little inner voice says, I'm wasting time, I need to be reading to learn, and that's what I struggle with, because I do like to read for pleasure, and sometimes that's the only way you can escape the grind of everyday, whether it's work-related or anything else. But
I'm a big mystery lover.
Yeah.
So
right now, actually, I'm actually juggling several books. I'm taking in the fall. I'm taking a class at OSU, the economics class. So I'm trying to refresh my understanding of economics as a science. So I'm reading Thomas Sowell's book titled Basic Economics.
And he's a great writer.
He's a great writer.
Yes.
It's amazing how such complex subject can be brought down to the level where anybody can understand.
Even an English major could follow Thomas Sowell.
Economics can be very dry and boring, and he makes it super interesting with examples and basically real life examples how the economy in different parts of it work and how they affect how decisions and that we make or governments make affect the everyday life. So that's one of the books that I'm currently reading. It's a volume, so so it's going to take me a while to finish it as I'm again, juggling several. I'm finishing up. When I read for pleasure, I sometimes read legal thrillers.
Yes.
The author that comes to mind, I think it's Mark Gimenez. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name properly. He's written a few excellent legal thrillers. Another author that I recently discovered, Mike Stewart. I think he only wrote like 3 or 4, and then he disappeared. But they actually take place in Alabama. His first book takes you from Alabama and New Orleans back and forth. It's a southern. It's a story that takes place in the deep South, and it's a very good book. I don't think we have a copy at the library. I actually had to buy a used.
We'll have to get one then.
I had to buy a used book online when I got into his series.
Wow.
Yeah. And also I guess when I read for pleasure, I'm not a huge fan of sci-fi from its when you talk about space travel and exploration or time travel, I prefer to watch the movies sometimes. But when I read sci-fi, it's a near future type of reading. I really enjoy the books about the emergence of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And so I think Daniel Suarez wrote a few books. I think he's a very well-known author. I think the first book that he kind of, if I'm not mistaken, Demon is the first book in that series. And Demon is spelled Daemon. So it's
an acronym for the.
In computer terminology, a daemon. It's an independent piece of software that runs within the operating system without the interference from the user. So it kind of anyway, this artificial AI comes to life and it wreaks havoc onto the economy and the social structure, and it's just a very interesting and exciting read. And coincidentally, I just picked up something the other day, another book on artificial intelligence. It's also nonfiction by M. Rogers. And in this case, the AI is actually very benevolent, and it's trying to help the humanity to reach another level of development, I guess. So, yeah. But as we always often talk, reading can be a very private activity, I guess, right? There is no right or wrong because people's preferences and preferences in reading are different. So whether you read romance or sci-fi or fantasy or fan fiction, it doesn't matter. I think what really matters is that you take the time to shut everything off that's around you and kind of sit down and immerse yourself in the story, because these days we have such a barrage of information that's coming at us. Everybody's competing for our attention, whether through social media or TV or the internet. A lot of these messages are different. They're all designed to sway you one way or the other, so everybody's competing for your decision, I guess, and your knowledge and your opinion. And sometimes because of the amount of the information that's coming at you, I don't think we're capable of making sometimes the right decisions. So we take the time to really sit and ponder and reflect on what's going on. And I think the book is the perfect tool for it, because it allows you to focus. And then the authors, I was thinking about it earlier today, how much would we pay, or how much would we do for the opportunity to meet some of the greatest thinkers and writers? If you think about
Aristotle,
or those that have are long gone, or even the modern day, whether it's business leaders or philosophers or achievers and doers and thinkers, and their time is valuable. And a lot of times the experience and knowledge that they present to you in the form of the book is distilled. But it may have taken them 30, 40, 50 years to arrive to that point. And so that is the book that they produce is that condensed knowledge. And so this is our opportunity to meet those people and learn from the wisdom of those who we trust or value, appreciate.
I like what you said about in reading, there isn't a right answer to get, because all of us, when we pick a book up, we create the world. We decide what, to a certain extent, what the person's voice sounds like, what they look like, and it pulls us in. It exercises our brain. It's good for us to read.
Right, I agree. I so very much agree with that, because I think a lot of times the fact that you're reading, it puts you, not only it gives you the opportunity to learn something new, because even with the most basic of fiction, if it's a good writer, they'll take their time and research on the subject that they're writing. And so even through a book of nonfiction,
Oh, yes.
you learn a lot of things that you otherwise wouldn't have come across. But then beyond that, it kind of helps your brain develop and think through, well, how would I react in this given situation? Or if this protagonist or antagonist, what they're doing, do I agree with their decisions or actions? It kind of puts you in that story, and not only there's a certain degree of empathy with the character, but then you're putting yourself in that story, and I think it also helps you develop as a person, as a human being. What would I do in this or that situation? Was that decision the best one? And then of course it kind of also, I think it helps you to be more analytical, or I think it helps you develop, because sometimes when you read the story, you kind of try, at least I do, I'm trying to predict what's going to happen next. And sometimes you get lost. You think, what's the next step? What's going to happen on the next page? And sometimes you may disagree with the author, but
Y'all aren't going to believe this, because we filmed everyone else except Giovanni, and he's echoing what we've had a variety of people across the community talk with us about books. You've said almost exactly what Dr. Little, who's a chemistry instructor at Southeastern, said when she was a very young reader. She started noticing that reading, even when it was fiction, was teaching her things that she uses as a scientist, because it was predicting. When you talked about the need to step back and set aside some time for reading, our next interview next week will be with our parish president, Leighton Ricks, and he said that he gets up very early in the morning in order to have time when he can just sit and concentrate on reading, when he knows he's not going to be interrupted.
And I would, from my professional perspective, and as the library director, and as we as librarians, sometimes I hear the sentiment that and sometimes people will say it to you with a certain degree of shame. They're ashamed of it, perhaps. Well, I don't read. Maybe I don't read enough. But what I would like to mention to our listeners or viewers, that the library has such a variety of resources that if you don't have time to sit down and read a book, but maybe your commute is such to where you drive from work to home or otherwise for 30, 40 or more minutes, make sure that you check out your local library. There's plenty of other resources.
The playaways are fabulous.
Books on CD. We have wonderful downloadable resources to where it's an app on your phone, and you log in with your library card, and you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of different titles that, in fact, I caught myself and I was kicking myself for being so unlibrarian-like, because the other day I was trying to find a certain title, and I don't know, I guess we are preconditioned by consumer, by a society, I guess. The first thing I did, I went to Amazon to see if the book was available, and then I kind of, this moment of epiphany, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I went and, logged into our library's website, and there were 3 titles available.
Right.
Placed a hold on it. The next day it was available.
There it is.
There it is. And what I couldn't, in fact, with the basic economics title that I'm reading right now, when I can't read it, it's playing in my car as I'm trying to get home. So again, just a reminder to our community that the library is a resource, is a vast resource of information.
And if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but I don't know how to use that, stay tuned, because Technology Tuesday will show you how to use those electronic resources Giovanni was just talking about. So,
and this is our community's investment. This is what we as the residents of Livingston Parish pay for, and it would be it's a worthwhile resource that I would encourage everyone to explore.
Because we love books so much, we want everybody to have the opportunity to be able to read and enjoy them. And the way that I, of course, came here to start working at the library was our most recent census showed that something like 15% of the parish had reading difficulties. So you instituted a program, an adult literacy program.
Yes.
So you can contact your library if you have reading difficulties. When we are able to start meeting again face to face, you can request a tutor. If you know anyone who needs help learning how to read or wants to become a better reader, we can arrange that through the library. We, of course, also have English as a second language classes.
Wonderful, yes. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because I think it's a tremendous loss to both the person who can't read because they're deprived of this enormous variety of information from history to just anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're depriving yourself from the knowledge of the generations before you, and you have that opportunity to read. And then, of course, even day-to-day life, day-to-day activities. When you have trouble reading, you're limiting yourself to what you can achieve. So, reading is a fundamental skill that And if you don't like to read, I would encourage you to give reading another chance. Perhaps you were growing up, and maybe a teacher or a school librarian or someone else, maybe your parents, try to get you to read something you didn't like. Maybe you'd like to read something on sports, and they were trying to get you to read history, and or vice versa. So there's no shame in reading anything, as long as you're reading and you're developing your cognitive abilities, and you're making. I think you're becoming, as you read and learn, you're becoming a better, more educated person.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us, and I really appreciate you being willing to kick off this Talking About Books segment. And we really appreciate all the support that our public gives us, because we couldn't do any of these wonderful programs that you've heard about if we didn't have the support of the people in Livingston Parish. So again, this is Charlotte Curtis with the Livingston Parish Library, and we've been sitting here talking about books, and can't wait to see y'all back in your local branches. So stay tuned and come see us again. Goodbye.